The valleys of Colombia's eastern Andes quivered in the night, as if bracing for an unprecedented storm. Could Washington's massive presence be nothing more than a warning, or was it a sign of a conflict about to ignite? Runways near Villavicencio and Arauca thundered with the roar of Fa-18 Hornets, F-35 Lightning IIs, and endless orbits of MQ-9 Reaper drones. On the ridgelines, Patriot batteries blinked in the dark, radar dishes swept the skies, and American Special Forces moved silently through forward bases. If all this was meant only to caution Caracas, what would happen when someone else treated it as an invitation to clash? In Lima, Peruvian generals bent over smoke-filled maps, the cold glow of screens cutting through the haze. They saw Colombia swelling beneath America's steel, a wall against Venezuelan ambition, but also a dangerous precedent. Foreign troops dug into South America, shattering balances that had held for decades. Would they wait in patience or gamble on a first strike? If Peru struck now, forcing the United States to bleed, how would events unfold? And what storm would descend upon the continent next? Preparations began in silence. Across jungle valleys of Vrem, batteries of BM-21 Grad rocket launchers concealed themselves beneath camouflage nets. Their 42 bracks were angled high, loaded with salvos of 122mm rockets. Nearby, heavy artillery batteries of 152mm and 122mm howitzers were dug into crude fire bases. Engineers strung camouflage nets, while officers whispered coordinates into radios. The target was clear: Colombian border garrisons, many of which now sheltered American troops. If Lima's gamble was to have meaning, it needed to hurt Washington directly. When the clock struck midnight, the jungle erupted. Dozens of Grad launchers spewed incandescent trails into the night, each salvo arcing like meteors toward Colombian soil. In less than a minute, hundreds of rockets screamed overhead, carrying thousands of kilograms of explosives. Moments later, the earth on the Colombian side convulsed, ammunition depots erupting in towers of flame, fuel trucks splitting open like torches, bunkers collapsing into firestorms. The artillery followed, shells whistling down in steady rhythm, pounding ridgelines until entire sections of rainforest canopy were stripped bare. The barrage was devastating. Colombian soldiers scrambled from their dugouts, only to be thrown back by concussive waves. American radar crews watched in disbelief as launch arcs lit up their screens like fireflies, entire batteries striking in synchronized waves. Forward bases reeled, communications blacked out, perimeter fences shredded. For Bogotá, the shock was unparalleled. Not guerrillas this time, not shadow insurgents, but the direct military hand of a neighboring state smashing into its soil. Above the chaos, Peru's Air Force joined the assault. MiG-29 SMP fighters, bristling with R-27 and R-73 missiles, streaked forward in hunter formations. Mirage 2000Ps carrying bunker-buster bombs glimmered under starlight. Behind them, armored Su-25 Frogfoots roared low, their wings heavy with cluster bombs and rocket pods. Their target was not just Colombian runways, but American infrastructure, hangars holding drones, radar installations, fuel reserves guarded by Marines. Precision strikes slammed into tarmacs, gouging them into craters, while fuel depots lit the sky with infernal columns of fire. Inside Colombian bunkers, radar operators clung to their consoles, their screens filled with dozens of hostile signatures, moving fast and deliberate. Controllers barked vectors to Colombian pilots scrambling on tarmacs, but many fighters barely cleared runways before incoming bombs turned concrete into rubble. American soldiers dove for cover as shockwaves rolled across bases. It was an opening blow designed for humiliation. Lima wanted images of burning U.S. equipment spreading across the world. In Bogotá, the presidential palace braced under urgent alarms. President Gustavo Petro convened commanders, his voice steady despite the chaos. Colombia will not yield to intimidation, not from neighbors, not from foreign guns. His words, relayed through encrypted channels, reached brigades across the Andes. For the United States, watching its own facilities under attack, the stakes crystallized instantly. To do nothing was to invite ridicule. To respond was to escalate. Washington chose escalation. At dawn, Colombian bases that survived roared back to life. Kfir C-10 and C-12 fighters, with their distinctive delta wings, surged into the skies. Each carried Derby beyond visual range missiles and Python 5 short-range hunters, lethal against even the agile MiG-29s. Behind them, American Hornets joined in twin afterburner roars, establishing combat air patrols. Above it all, an American E-3 AWACS orbited, its spinning dome funneling radar data into every cockpit. The war for air supremacy had begun. The first duels were brutal. A Kfir, callsign Condor 1, locked onto a Peruvian Mirage from 40 kilometers, loosing a Derby missile. The Mirage flared hard, twisting into a dive, but the missile tracked relentlessly, detonating against its fuselage in a blossom of fire. Seconds later, a MiG-29 fired an R-27 at Condor 1, but American jamming scrambled guidance, the missile slicing harmlessly into clouds. An American Hornet retaliated, its AMRAAM streaking true, slamming into the MiG and sending wreckage tumbling into the jungle below. The skies over VRAM became a lethal dance of technology, courage, and fire. On the ground, Colombia's counterattack sparked to life. Squadrons of A-29B Super Tucanos skimmed treetops, their 50 caliber guns stitching lines of death across Peruvian artillery sites. One BM-21 battery, caught mid-reload, erupted as rockets cooked off in chain explosions, annihilating crews in searing flashes. Black Hawk helicopters ferried rapid reaction battalions into contested zones, rotors chopping through smoke-choked valleys. M117 Guardians rolled down jungle tracks, their turrets hammering Peruvian infantry positions with heavy machine gun fire. Peru answered with savagery. Su-25 Frogfoots barreled into the fray, unleashing rocket salvos that shredded trenches and flipped armored cars in sprays of dirt and shrapnel. Entire villages along the frontier ignited as cluster munitions detonated across rooftops. Civilians poured into roads, terrified and disoriented, their cries captured by international media. For Bogotá, the pressure mounted. Citizens demanded protection. Allies demanded explanations, and generals demanded heavier American involvement. Washington did not hesitate. From the deck of the USS Baton, anchored in Caribbean waters, new squadrons of Hornets launched into the sky, while Pentagon statements declared any hostile incursion against Colombian sovereignty will be answered as aggression against the United States. War planners in Lima had hoped Washington might hesitate. Instead, the U.S. had taken the bait, and now came to the battlefield with its full weight. Colombian brigades pressed under this shield. EE-9 Cascavel reconnaissance vehicles darted through jungle passes, their 90mm cannons spitting shells at Peruvian armor. Infantry squads strung barbed wire across choke points, laying ambushes with javelin and spike anti-tank missiles supplied by allies. American special forces, embedded within Colombian units, coordinated Reaper drone strikes. Hellfires rained from above, each explosion tearing into Peruvian convoys attempting to reinforce the front. The battle near San Martin province exploded with violence. Guardians advanced under covering fire, their heavy machine guns hammering entrenched defenders. Cascavels maneuvered nimbly against heavier Peruvian tanks, darting between cover, firing, then vanishing into foliage. Each skirmish became a cat-and-mouse duel, Colombian speed versus Peruvian armor. Smoke curled from burning wrecks, both sides trading steel and blood in the claustrophobic jungles. Above, Black Hawks circled like predators. Door gunners sprayed Peruvian troop convoys, tracers tearing through canvas trucks. Rockets streaked into fuel depots, igniting orange towers of fire visible for miles. Super Tucanos swooped low, their precision bombs smashing artillery hidden under camouflage nets. The battlefield boiled with chaos. Burning vehicles, shattered tree lines, and soldiers staggering through smoke. For Colombian troops, morale hardened. They were no longer fighting alone. But Peru escalated once more. Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks, the pride of its armored corps, rumbled toward the front. Their 120mm smoothbore cannons cracked with terrifying power, blasting cascavels into twisted husks. Colombian infantry scattered as the steel beasts pushed forward, nearly impervious to small-caliber fire. For Lima, the Leopards were a final gamble, proof that weight of armor could still smash through agility and cunning. Yet Colombian doctrine did not break. Ambush teams lay in wait, hidden in jungle foliage with anti-tank guided missiles. As the first Leopards crested a narrow pass, missiles screamed from shadows, striking side armor where protection was weakest. One tank erupted in fire. Then another, choking the road in black smoke. Infantry with rocket-propelled grenades joined the ambush, turning the advance into a fiery graveyard of steel. Even Peru's strongest assets bled. In the skies, American coordination proved decisive. AWACS controllers guided Kfirs into ambush vectors, their Python 5 missiles snapping onto targets with off-bore sight agility. Two Mirages attempting a low-level ingress were blown apart within seconds, fireballs lighting the jungle canopy. Surviving Peruvian pilots broke formation, shaken by the realization that courage was useless against overwhelming coordination and superior technology. Peru's Grad launchers, once the terror of the opening salvo, now became hunted prey. Colombian counter-battery radars tracked every arc, triangulating positions in seconds. Artillery fire answered with ruthless precision, shredding launchers as they scrambled to relocate. Trucks exploded in violent convulsions, their crews annihilated mid-stride. The spearhead of Lima's assault was reduced to twisted wreckage. American involvement deepened with every hour. Special forces guided Reaper drones onto Peruvian supply lines, Hellfires striking convoys hiding beneath camouflage nets. Hornets prowled aggressively, intercepting any frogfoot daring to sortie. The psychological pressure on Peruvian troops mounted. No movement was safe, no convoy unseen. Lima's soldiers, once confident, now marched under the dread of invisible eyes. Colombian infantry surged forward, Guardians and Cascavels blasting apart defensive lines. Super Tucanos strafed foxholes while Black Hawks delivered reinforcements at a relentless tempo. Under this combined arms pressure, Peru's defensive lines cracked, bunkers burned, trenches collapsed, and retreating squads abandoned rifles in their flight. The counteroffensive rolled steadily southward. Desperate to stall momentum, Peruvian commanders hurled more Su-25 sorties into the fray. Frogfoots loosed salvo after salvo at advancing armor, torching several Guardians in fiery bursts. For a moment, the Colombian push faltered, but American Hornets swooped in like executioners, AMRAAMs, tearing into Frogfoots with clinical precision. The sky filled with falling wreckage, hope for Peruvian counterstrikes evaporating in fire. At sea, Peru sought leverage. Frigates armed with Automat Mk2 anti-ship missiles patrolled Pacific waters, and Type 209 submarines prowled silently. But shadowing them were U.S. Aegis destroyers, their radars and sonar tracking every move. A single clash would have meant annihilation, and Peruvian admirals hesitated. The maritime front simmered with tension, but never erupted. The true fight remained in the jungle. Artillery duels consumed the valleys. Colombian barrages, guided by American intelligence, smashed retreating Peruvian convoys, roads filled with burning armor, smoking supply trucks, and shattered equipment. Civilians, once displaced by Peruvian fire, emerged from shelters to cheer Colombian soldiers reclaiming their towns. Bogotá's narrative shifted. No longer besieged victim, but resilient defender, now victorious liberator. Diplomats raced to respond. The Organization of American States convened emergency sessions, condemning Peru's actions as reckless aggression. Washington lobbied allies to impose sanctions, freezing trade and choking Lima's economy. European partners joined, isolating Peru on every front. International media broadcast images of Colombian resilience and Peruvian devastation. Politically, as militarily, Lima was cornered. As darkness fell, drones hovered overhead, thermal sensors tracking shattered Peruvian battalions stumbling south. Wreckage dotted valleys, burned-out Leopards, twisted Grad launchers, crumpled Mirage fuselages. After weeks of thunder, silence returned to the jungle. For Colombian soldiers, the stillness felt alien. For Peru, it felt like defeat. In Bogotá, jubilation filled the air. Victory speeches rang across radio waves. President Petro saluted soldiers and citizens alike, praising their resilience under fire. American envoys pledged reconstruction aid, promising bridges, schools, and bases would rise from ruins. Stories spread of Super Tucanos annihilating rocket batteries, Black Hawks landing under fire, infantry ambushing tanks with surgical precision. A mythos of triumph took root in the Colombian psyche. In Lima, the mood was darker. Military prestige lay in tatters, commanders privately admitting their miscalculations, underestimating Colombia's determination, misjudging America's resolve, and overestimating their own staying power. Tanks, jets, and submarines remained in arsenals, but their aura of invincibility was gone. Citizens, mourning lost sons and wasted treasure, demanded accountability. Politicians whispered of resignations and inquiries. The conflict ended not with treaties, but with reality. Peru had failed. Colombia, with America's shield, had repelled the assault. The jungles of VRAM smoldered as mute witnesses to firestorms and fury. For Washington, the lesson was simple. Its presence in Colombia was not just sustainable. It was unchallengeable. And for Venezuela, watching nervously from across the border, the message was unmistakable. Aggression in northern South America would not be tolerated. The balance of power had shifted, not just in battle, but in history.